No one could explain how the foal got inside the barn. That was the first thing Caleb noticed as he stood frozen in the doorway, the heavy wooden door creaking behind him. The padlock still hung from the latch, untouched, exactly where he had locked it the night before. No scratches. No broken hinge. No sign of forced entry. And yet, there it was, standing in the center of the barn, trembling slightly in the cold morning air. A foal. A tiny, dark-coated foal with legs too thin for its body and eyes far too alert for something so young. Caleb's breath caught in his chest. He'd been running this ranch alone for 3 years now, ever since the accident that took his brother and left him with more land than he ever wanted. He knew every sound the barn made at night. Every animal. Every shadow. Nothing appeared in this place without him knowing. Nothing except this. The foal shifted its weight, hooves scraping softly against the dirt floor. It didn't bolt. It didn't cry out. It just watched him, ears flicking, muscles tight, ready to flee if he moved too fast. "Easy," Caleb murmured, though his voice shook. That was when he saw it. A folded piece of paper, weighted down by a small stone, lying near the foal's front hooves. A letter. The barn felt colder suddenly, like the air itself had pulled back to watch. Caleb took a cautious step forward. The foal flinched, stepping back, its body angling protectively toward the far wall. Fear was written into every line of it, fear learned too early, fear that didn't belong to something born into safety. Caleb stopped moving. He'd seen this look before. Not in horses, but in people. In himself, after the nights when grief pressed so hard against his chest he couldn't breathe. The kind of fear that came from being left with no good options. "I'm not going to hurt you," he whispered. The foal's nostrils flared. It didn't relax, but it didn't run either. Slowly, carefully, Caleb crouched down and reached for the letter instead. His fingers hovered over the paper for a moment before touching it. Something about the weight of it felt wrong, too heavy for a single page. Like it carried more than words. He unfolded it. The handwriting was uneven, rushed, pressed deep into the paper as if the writer had been afraid they'd never get the chance to finish. "If you are reading this, I'm already gone. I didn't know where else to leave him. Please don't look for me." Caleb swallowed hard. The foal shifted again, hooves tapping nervously, as if it sensed the gravity of what was being read aloud in silence. The letter went on. "His mother died last night. I tried everything. I swear I did. But I don't have the money, the land, or the strength to keep him alive. You were the only name people said with kindness." Caleb felt his throat tighten. People didn't usually say his name with anything these days. Not since he'd pulled away from town, not since he'd stopped answering calls that reminded him of everything he'd lost. He read the final lines. "The barn was locked because I was afraid. Afraid you'd say no. Afraid he'd die if I hesitated. I'm sorry for the trespass. Please, just give him a chance." For a long moment, Caleb couldn't move. The foal let out a soft, uncertain sound, barely more than a breath. That sound broke something open inside him. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket, then looked back at the small, fragile life standing alone in his barn. The foal's ribs showed faintly beneath its coat. One leg trembled more than the others. Too young to be without its mother. Too vulnerable to have been left like this. And yet, somehow still standing. "You picked the wrong place," Caleb said quietly, a bitter smile tugging at his mouth. "I don't save things anymore." The foal didn't understand the words, but it seemed to understand the tone. It took one hesitant step forward, then stopped, unsure. Caleb felt the old instinct rise in him, the instinct to retreat before hope could hurt him again. He'd sworn after his brother's death that he wouldn't take on anything fragile. Anything that could break and leave him standing in the aftermath. But this wasn't a promise he'd made to himself. This was a promise someone else had begged him to keep. Outside, the sun climbed higher, light spilling through the gaps in the wooden walls, painting the foal in gold. Dust motes floated in the air, suspended like time itself was holding its breath. Caleb exhaled slowly. "All right," he said at last. "One step at a time." The foal flicked its ears. Caleb didn't know it yet, but opening that barn door that morning wasn't the beginning of a mystery. It was the beginning of a test, of patience, trust, and whether a man who believed he had nothing left to give could still become someone's last hope. And the hardest part? The foal didn't trust him. Not yet. Caleb didn't sleep that night. Every hour, he found himself pulling on his boots and stepping back into the barn, half expecting the foal to vanish the same way it had appeared, like a dream you didn't dare believe in. But each time, the foal was still there. Standing. Breathing. Watching. Always watching. By dawn, the temperature had dropped sharply. Frost clung to the edges of the barn door, and the foal's breath came out in quick, shallow puffs. That's when Caleb knew the truth he'd been trying to avoid. The foal was in trouble. He moved slowly, carrying a bucket of warm water mixed with electrolyte powder, the kind he kept for emergencies. As soon as he stepped too close, the foal startled violently, scrambling backward until its hindquarters bumped the wooden wall. Fear flared in its eyes. "Easy," Caleb said again, softer this time. "I'm not taking anything from you." The foal's legs shook. Not just fear, weakness. Caleb noticed it then, the subtle sway, the uneven pressure on the left foreleg. He crouched low, staying still, scanning the foal like he'd learned to do years ago when his brother still handled the horses and he only helped when asked. The foal was dehydrated. Undernourished. And worst of all, it hadn't nursed properly. Too many hours without milk. Too many hours without warmth. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a countdown. Caleb backed away and pulled out his phone. One signal bar flickered on, then vanished. He tried again. Nothing. The ranch sat too far from town, and storms the night before had knocked the lines down. Of course. He looked back at the foal. "I'll figure this out," he promised, though he had no idea if that was true. When he returned with a bottle and improvised milk replacer, the foal refused it completely. It tossed its head, backing away, panic rising fast. One wrong move and the fragile legs could snap under pressure. Caleb froze. This wasn't like fixing fences or mending gates. This was life slipping quietly through his fingers. That's when the foal collapsed. Not hard, just a sudden buckling, like the strength had finally run out. It went down onto its knees, then it sighed, breathing fast, eyes wide with confusion and terror. "No, no, no," Caleb whispered, rushing forward and then stopping himself just in time. He knelt several feet away, heart hammering. The foal tried to rise again and failed. Something inside Caleb cracked open. The memory came uninvited, his brother lying still in a hospital bed, machines doing the breathing for him, doctors speaking in careful, practiced voices. "There's nothing more we can do." Caleb clenched his fists. Not again. He slid closer, inch by inch, keeping his movements slow, predictable. He spoke constantly, not because the foal understood the words, but because silence felt too much like giving up. "That's it, you're okay, just stay with me." The foal's breathing eased slightly. Its eyes followed him, tracking every movement. Trust didn't arrive all at once. It never does. Caleb reached out, stopping just short of touching. The foal didn't pull away this time. Its ears flicked, but it stayed still. That was enough. Gently, Caleb rested his hand against the foal's shoulder. It was colder than it should have been. "We're cutting this close," he murmured. Hours passed in fragments, warming blankets, slow attempts at feeding, the foal finally taking a few weak swallows before turning its head away. Outside, clouds rolled in again, dark and heavy, as if the world itself was testing how much more weight this fragile moment could carry. By late afternoon, the foal stood again, but barely. That's when Caleb noticed the mark. At first, he thought it was dirt. A smudge along the foal's neck, half hidden beneath the halter. But when he leaned closer, his stomach dropped. A brand. Faded. Old. Almost deliberately disguised. Caleb recognized it instantly. His breath caught. That brand belonged to a breeding operation over 200 miles away. One with a reputation people didn't like to talk about. Horses pushed too hard. Mares bred too young. Foals discarded if they didn't meet expectations. A place his brother had once argued about shutting down. Caleb felt the letter burning in his pocket. So that was it. This foal hadn't just been abandoned. It had been escaped. A quiet knock sounded suddenly at the barn door. Caleb spun around. "Caleb, A voice called. "You in there?" It was Mara, the nearest neighbor for miles, a former rider who'd lost her career to an injury but never lost her instincts. She stepped inside, took one look at the foal, and went still. "Oh my God!" Her eyes dropped to the halter. The brand. She didn't need to say anything. "You know," Caleb said quietly. Mara nodded. "I do." She crouched beside him, lowering her voice. "If they are looking for him, they won't find him here," Caleb said, sharper than he intended. Mara studied him. "That's a big promise." Caleb looked at the foal, now leaning subtly into the warmth of his hand for the first time. "So was leaving him alive," he replied. The foal lifted its head slightly, pressing closer, just enough to feel. That single, fragile gesture changed everything. Because in that moment, Caleb realized something terrifying and wonderful all at once. The foal wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. It was choosing to trust. The truck appeared at the edge of the property just after sunset. Caleb noticed the headlights first, twin white eyes cutting through the dust as the vehicle slowed, then stopped near the outer fence. His stomach tightened instantly. Nobody came out this far without a reason. Not after dark. Not unannounced. Mara noticed too. "You expecting anyone?" she asked quietly. Caleb shook his head. Inside the barn, the foal stirred, lifting its head at the sound of the engine. It didn't bolt this time. Instead, it pressed closer to the stall wall, eyes wide, muscles tensing beneath its thin coat. Fear recognized fear. Caleb rested a hand on the foal's neck, slow and steady. "Easy," he whispered. "You're safe." He didn't believe that entirely, but he needed the foal too. The truck's engine idled for a long moment. Then the driver's door opened. Footsteps. Gravel crunching. A man's voice carried faintly on the wind, talking into a phone. Mara exhaled sharply. "That's not good." Caleb straightened. The memory of the brand burned behind his eyes. The breeding operation. The rumors. Horses that disappeared without records. Foals that never made it to auction. If they were here for the foal. Caleb reached into his pocket and felt the folded letter. The desperate handwriting. The plea. This wasn't just about trespassing anymore. This was about ownership. Control. And whether a piece of paper could outweigh a lifetime of cruelty. The footsteps stopped outside the barn. A knock followed, firm, confident, like the person on the other side expected compliance. Caleb didn't open the door. "Ranch owner?" the man called. "Name's Turner. Just got a few questions." Mara moved closer to Caleb, her voice barely audible. "You don't have to answer." Caleb knew that. But he also knew silence sometimes invited worse. He cracked the door open just enough to see the man. Mid-40s. Clean boots. Jacket too new for ranch work. Eyes that scanned instead of met yours. "Evening," Turner said smoothly. "We're tracking a missing foal. GPS tag shows it passed through this area." Caleb's pulse thudded in his ears. "No foals here but mine." Turner's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Funny. The barn on this property shows up locked in our system. Someone was thorough." Caleb felt the weight of the moment press down hard. "You're trespassing," he said. Turner shrugged. "So was whoever broke into your barn." Mara stepped forward. "There was a letter," she said. "You know about the mare. The foal was left to survive." Turner's eyes flicked past them, toward the stall. The foal shifted. One small step back. Another. Caleb moved instinctively, placing himself between Turner and the stall. "You're not taking him," Caleb said, voice low but unyielding. Turner sighed, like a man disappointed by predictable resistance. "You don't understand. That foal is worth more than this entire spread. Bloodline's rare. His dam wasn't supposed to die." Caleb felt something inside him go cold. So that was it. The foal wasn't a mistake. It was an asset. "Animals aren't inventory," Caleb said. Turner chuckled. "Tell that to the contracts." Caleb pulled the letter from his pocket and held it up. "Someone made a choice. Someone who cared more about this foal than your operation ever did." Turner glanced at it briefly. "That letter won't hold up." He took a step forward. The foal panicked. With a sudden burst of strength, it lunged sideways, hooves slipping in the dirt. Caleb reacted without thinking, grabbing the halter and pulling gently but firmly, absorbing the movement so the foal wouldn't fall. The contact was full. Real. Unavoidable. The foal didn't fight him. It leaned into him. That moment, small, silent, undeniable, changed the tone of the room. Turner saw it too. The way the foal's breathing steadied. The way its muscles relaxed against Caleb's arm. "That horse trusts you," Turner said slowly. "Which means it's been handled." Caleb met his gaze. "It's been protected." Turner's jaw tightened. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "No," Caleb said. "You did." For a long second, nobody moved. Then Turner stepped back. "I'll be back," he said. "With paperwork." The truck roared to life moments later, taillights vanishing into the dark. Silence rushed in after it. Mara let out a breath she'd been holding. "You just painted a target on your back." Caleb looked down at the foal, now standing on its own, pressing its forehead lightly against his chest like it had nowhere else to go. "Then they'll have to go through me," he said. That night, Caleb slept in the barn. He didn't trust the locks anymore. He didn't trust the silence. He sat against the stall wall, blanket pulled tight, listening to the foal's breathing even out as exhaustion finally claimed it. In the quiet, he thought about his brother. About all the times he'd walked away instead of standing his ground. About the life he'd been living, safe, small, untouched by hope. Near midnight, the foal stirred and took a few uncertain steps toward him. It stopped. Hesitated. Then lowered itself carefully beside him. Caleb didn't move. He didn't need to. Trust had already crossed the distance. And somewhere in the dark, the choice was made. Not just to protect the foal, but to fight. The papers arrived 2 days later. Not by mail, but by hand. Caleb saw the truck before it reached the gate this time. A different one. White. No logos. It stopped just short of the fence, and 2 people stepped out. One in a dark coat carrying a folder. The other in a windbreaker with a state emblem stitched on the sleeve. Mara stood beside Caleb, jaw tight. "That's official." The foal sensed it before either of them spoke. It paced the stall, head tossing, hooves tapping in sharp, uneven beats. The trust it had given so cautiously now flickered with uncertainty. Caleb rested his palm against its neck. "I've got you," he murmured. He hoped that was true. The woman with the folder introduced herself first. Lydia Ross. Legal representative for High Ridge Breeding. Caleb felt his chest tighten at the name. The man beside her nodded. "Animal control. We're here to assess the situation." Lydia opened the folder and began reading like this was routine. "The foal currently on this property is registered, tagged, and legally owned by my client. We're here to reclaim him." Caleb didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. That foal was abandoned. Lydia smiled politely. "So you say?" Mara stepped forward. "There's a letter." Lydia glanced at it briefly. Anonymous. No signature. No proof. The foal stumbled suddenly, legs splaying for a terrifying second before Caleb caught him. The animal control officer's expression changed immediately. He stepped closer. "That foal isn't well." "No," Caleb said. "But he's getting better." The officer crouched, observing carefully. "He's dehydrated. Underweight. Likely separated too early." Caleb met his eyes. He would have died if he hadn't been left here. That did something. The officer straightened. "I'm going to need a full welfare assessment." Lydia's smile faltered. "With respect, that's unnecessary." The officer didn't budge. "It's protocol." For the next hour, the barn felt like a courtroom. Measurements. Notes. Photos. The foal endured it all, trembling but standing, leaning into Caleb whenever he could, as if anchoring himself to the one person who hadn't tried to take anything from him. Then the officer asked a single question that changed everything. "Where is the mare?" Lydia hesitated. "Deceased," she said shortly. "Cause?" Another pause. "Complications." The officer's jaw tightened. "We'll need records." Lydia snapped the folder shut. "This is harassment." "No," he replied calmly. "This is accountability." The standoff ended with a temporary order. The Foal would remain on Caleb's property pending investigation. Lydia left furious. But the danger didn't. That night, the Foal crashed. Hard. It started with shaking. Then labored breathing. Then a collapse so sudden Caleb barely caught him in time. Mara was already on the phone with the emergency vet, voice shaking. "We need help now." The vet arrived near midnight, headlights sweeping across the barn like a final warning. She moved fast, for fluids, medication, quiet commands. Caleb knelt beside the Foal, whispering constantly, even as fear clawed up his spine. "This is touch and go," the vet said quietly. "If he pulls through the night, he has a chance." Caleb stayed awake until dawn. At sunrise, the Foal lifted his head. Just slightly. The vet smiled tiredly. "He's a fighter." Caleb exhaled for the first time in hours. Days later, the investigation concluded. High Ridge was sighted. Fined. Watched. The Foal was released into Caleb's care permanently. When Lydia returned, it was only to collect her defeat. "This isn't over," she said. Caleb didn't answer. He was too busy watching the Foal take confident steps into the sunlight, stronger now, steadier, alive. Mara smiled through tears. "You did it." Caleb shook his head. "He did." The Foal paused, turned back, and pressed his nose gently against Caleb's shoulder. And for the first time since his brother's death, Caleb allowed himself to believe something he'd sworn off long ago. That saving one life could still save his own. The early morning sun crept cautiously over the horizon, its golden light spilling into the barn where the Foal had slept fitfully through the night. The air was cool, filled with the scent of hay and the lingering warmth of the Foal's fragile body. Sarah stood at the doorway, her heart still pounding from the roller coaster of emotions she had ridden the previous 24 hours. Every sound, the soft shuffle of hooves, the gentle rustle of straw, felt amplified, like the world itself was holding its breath alongside her. She glanced down at the Foal, now tentatively rising on shaky legs, and a wave of awe swept over her. This tiny, trembling creature, who had appeared in the locked barn like an enigma, had endured the night without complaint, and somehow it had survived. Her fingers brushed over the crumpled piece of paper that had been left beside the Foal. She had not dared read it until the night had passed and the Foal was safe. Now, with trembling hands, she unfolded the letter, and the words revealed a story that made her eyes widen in disbelief. The letter explained that the Foal had been abandoned by its previous owner, not out of malice, but desperation. The farm where it had been born was failing, the owners overwhelmed by debt and illness. They had known they could not care for it, and yet, in their panic, they had left it in a place they hoped someone kind-hearted would find. The handwriting was uneven, almost childlike, yet suffused with raw emotion. A plea for mercy, a hope that this small life might be given a chance. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. She had read hundreds of stories, witnessed countless rescues, but this felt personal, as if fate itself had nudged her toward this little horse, trusting her to make the difference. For a long moment, she simply watched the Foal wobble toward a patch of sunlight, its legs still uncertain, its ears flicking nervously at every sound. Then she spoke softly, barely above a whisper, "You're safe now. You don't have to be afraid anymore." The Foal froze, head raised, nostrils flaring. And yet, after a heartbeat, it took another step toward her, curiosity overcoming instinctive fear. That small gesture, the tentative trust of a creature who had been abandoned and frightened, struck Sarah like a lightning bolt. She felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a sacred promise. Over the next few hours, Sarah fed the Foal carefully, allowing it to nibble from her hand, every gesture measured, every movement intentional. She watched as the Foal's large, dark eyes tracked her, gradually softening with recognition. There were moments of tension. The Foal would flinch at sudden sounds, jerk away at shadows, but Sarah remained patient, her voice a constant thread of calm and reassurance. In between, she found herself thinking about her own past, the struggles she had endured, the loss of her family farm, the failures that had left her questioning herself, but somehow these memories seemed to connect with the foal's own story of abandonment. It was as if, through this fragile horse, she could confront her own fears, her own heartbreak, and emerge stronger. By mid-afternoon, the foal had grown bolder. It ventured further from its straw bed, exploring corners of the barn it had never known, yet always returning to Sarah's side. She laughed quietly at its clumsy attempts to bound across the floor, the tiny hooves slipping and sliding, and she realized something profound. Trust was not given, it was earned, step by step, moment by moment. And this tiny creature, in its vulnerability, was teaching her patience, empathy, and the quiet joy of watching life fight to survive. She pulled out her phone, instinctively capturing a few photos, thinking about the viewers who would follow this journey online, but also knowing these images were more than content. They were proof of resilience, of connection, of miracles hidden in everyday moments. Night began to fall, painting the barn in long shadows and warm amber light. The foal, now visibly more relaxed, nestled against Sarah's side. She stroked its neck, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath her palm, and she whispered a promise she didn't quite know how to keep yet, but would. "I will help you grow. I will protect you. And one day, the world will see what a brave little soul you are." The foal's eyelids drooped, a sigh escaping its tiny lungs, and in that quiet exhale, Sarah felt the culmination of the story, the triumph of care, love, and determination over abandonment, fear, and uncertainty. It was more than survival, it was transformation. The next day, the first steps toward integration into the larger herd began. Sarah led the foal cautiously into a fenced paddock where older horses grazed, wary but curious. There were moments of drama, an elder mare flicking her ears, a sudden kick that sent the foal skidding backward. But Sarah remained vigilant, intervening gently when necessary, encouraging, guiding, protecting. Slowly, cautiously, the foal learned to navigate the complexities of herd dynamics. Every interaction was a lesson, every stumble an opportunity for growth, and every successful connection a cause for celebration. By evening, it was clear, the foal was not just surviving anymore, it was thriving. And then came the final, most poignant moment. Sarah opened the letter once more, reflecting on the life-altering decision made by someone who, in desperation, had left a note and entrusted a stranger with a fragile life. She posted a short video clip of the foal exploring the paddock, its ears perked and tail swishing, adding softly, "This little one is proof that even in the darkest circumstances, hope finds a way." Share this story, spread the word, and remember, sometimes, the smallest beings teach the biggest lessons. Comments and messages poured in almost immediately, viewers touched by the narrative, inspired by the bond, and moved to support rescue efforts. Sarah smiled, realizing that the foal's story had extended far beyond the barn walls, resonating with hearts across the globe. As night descended, the foal finally rested, curled beside Sarah in the barn. She reflected quietly. The journey had begun with fear and uncertainty, threaded through with tiny moments of trust and courage, and had culminated in a connection that neither human nor horse would ever forget. There were still challenges ahead. The foal would need training, nurturing, and guidance, but for the first time, both of them faced the future with confidence, knowing that together, they could overcome anything. And as Sarah turned off the lights and stepped outside, the stars twinkling above like distant witnesses, she felt a profound sense of awe, that life, in all its unpredictability, had led her to this moment, and that sometimes, the most unexpected arrivals can change everything.